All right, let's get into it. You've seen this a million times, right? One person is having a full-on emotional breakdown because their team lost a game, and the person right next to them is, well, they're just wondering what's for dinner. It turns out that huge difference might not just be about personal taste. It might actually be hardwired into their brains.
So, what is really going on here? How can a simple game create such a massive emotional divide between people? That's the big mystery we're going to try and solve today.
And this isn't some small niche thing we're talking about. A whopping 60% of Americans are deeply invested in sports. It's a huge part of our culture, which, honestly, makes the people who feel absolutely nothing even more fascinating to look at.
So to figure this out, we're going to go on a little journey. We'll start with our ancient instincts in the modern human tribe, then we'll look at the addictive side of things in the brain's reward game. After that, we'll talk about how we budget our feelings, where we all look for meaning, and finally, what it means to be playing a different game altogether.
Okay, let's kick things off by hitting rewind, way back, thousands of years. The first piece of this puzzle lies deep in our evolutionary past. It's all about our deep, fundamental need to belong to a group.
Look, humans are tribal creatures, period. For our ancestors, being part of a tribe wasn't a hobby. It was literally the difference between life and death. Your group helped you hunt, they protected you, they made sure you survived. And believe me, that powerful instinct has not gone anywhere.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. There's a chemical trigger for this today. When a fan watches their team, their brain gets a little hit of oxytocin. That's the exact same bonding hormone that connects you to your family and your closest friends. So their brain is literally tricking them into feeling like these athletes are part of their clan. And this just lays it out perfectly. The core need, belonging, it's the exact same. But how we express it, totally different. The life or death stakes of survival have been swapped out for the emotional stakes of identity, community, and, let's be honest, way better merchandise.
So what about the non-fan? Well, it seems their tribal instincts just aren't as dialed up. One study in 2019 found that people who don't really care about sports show way less of that us versus them thinking. Their identity isn't as tied to a group, so they don't automatically see the other team as the enemy. Okay, so that's the tribal piece of the puzzle. But it's not just about belonging. For a fan, the brain is also playing this really powerful and, potentially addictive little reward game. I mean, think about it. Every single play in a game is a tiny dose of anticipation. Are they going to score? Will they make the stop? This constant, nagging uncertainty triggers a release of dopamine. That's the brain's feel-good chemical, and it just makes the fan crave more and more of the action. And there's actually a scientific name for this. It's called intermittent reinforcement. Because the reward, a goal, a win, is totally unpredictable, it makes the act of watching even more addictive. It's the exact same psychological trick that makes slot machines so darn effective. And that is not an exaggeration. Scientists literally call this the single most addictive reward schedule known to psychology. Get this, fMRI scans show that your brain's reward centers light up the same way when your team wins as they do when a gambler hits a jackpot. So if you're a non-fan, you might be wondering, why doesn't this work on me? Well, the answer might literally be in your genes. Some research suggests that tiny variations in our dopamine receptor genes can actually predict how much our brains get a kick out of this kind of thing. Your indifference might just be hardwired. Now hold on, this doesn't mean non-fans don't have passion. Not at all. It's usually about where that passion and that empathy is directed. You see, everyone has a budget for how much they can care about things. Fans often do this thing psychologists have a great name for, burgeoning, which stands for basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they say, "We won," tying their own self-esteem to that victory. But have you ever noticed what happens when the team loses? All of a sudden, it's "they lost." It's a clever way to psychologically protect yourself from the failure. Non-fans, on the other hand, just don't really engage in this. Their sense of self tends to be more stable because it doesn't rise and fall with the performance of a group of people they've never even met. They just don't need that external win to feel good about themselves. The most important thing to get here is that we all have a limited amount of emotional energy. For fans, a big slice of that emotional pie goes to their sports team. For non-fans, that exact same energy is just invested somewhere else, in art, a social cause, or maybe their personal relationships. And at the end of the day, this all comes down to one of the most basic human drivers there is, the search for a good story, for a sense of meaning.
For a sports fan, the drama of a game is a powerful real-life narrative. The underdog story, the historic comeback. It's epic stuff. A non-fan isn't missing that need for a story. They just find that exact same sense of meaning in a great book, a personal project, or maybe a huge scientific discovery. This all leads to two really different ways of investing your emotions. Fans often have what's called a parasocial relationship with their team. It's basically a one-sided connection. They're a spectator. But a lot of non-fans, they seem to prefer direct engagement. They'd rather put their energy where it's a two-way street, where their care can actually influence the outcome. They'd rather be a participant in their own story.
So after all that, after looking at our tribal brains, our reward systems, and our search for meaning, what's the big takeaway? It's pretty simple, really. We're all just playing different games. So, if you're one of those people who just doesn't get the hype around sports, listen up. The most important thing to take away from all this is you are not broken, you are not boring, and you definitely do not lack passion.
Your indifference is just a product of your own unique wiring. Your brain's reward system, those ancient tribal instincts, and where you choose to spend your empathy, it's all just calibrated a little differently than a sports fanatic's brain. And you know what? That's perfectly okay.
In the end, it's not about one way being better or worse. You're just playing a different game. And when all your emotional energy is invested in things you can actually influence, your relationships, your work, your community, it does raise a pretty interesting question. Maybe that game has even higher stakes.